The golden afternoon sunlight poured down on the backyard, where the smoky aroma of BBQ mingled with the lively twang of country music. My mother's 60th birthday party was brimming with laughter, the clinking of beer glasses and the boisterous stories of relatives, friends, and neighbors. I, Nathan, stood quietly by the drink table holding a cold water bottle, trying to blend into the festive atmosphere. But then, like a bolt of lightning in a clear sky, my father approached, his face flushed with alcohol and anger. In front of dozens of eyes, he pointed straight at me, his voice sharp as a blade. "Nathan, if you don't leave, don't call me your father anymore." The entire yard fell deathly silent. The music still played, but no one heard anything except that chilling declaration. I felt every gaze, my mother's, my brother Ryan's, relatives, even the kids playing nearby, fixed on me as if I were an outsider who had just ruined the celebration. My chest tightened, but I said nothing. I just wanted to disappear. I turned, walking across the grass, my shoes muddy from the morning rain. At that moment, a soft but clear voice rang out, "Hey, boss." I stopped in my tracks, not looking back. Emily, Ryan's new girlfriend, had just uttered 2 words that turned the entire backyard into a silent stage. Every gaze shifted from me to her, then back to me. I heard the murmurs, the unspoken questions. Emily was an employee at the fintech company I co-founded, but no one here knew that. No one knew who I was beyond that Nate guy who does something with computers. I didn't turn around. I kept walking, leaving behind the afternoon sunlight, the smell of BBQ, and the shattered assumptions about me, broken like glass. This isn't a story about a man who ran away, but about one who learned to stand tall. Not with shouts, but with the weight of resolute silence. I'm Nathan, 32 years old, living in a small town 45 minutes drive from Chicago. Every morning I brew a cup of black coffee, check my emails, and drive my old Honda to the office of the fintech company I co-founded with 2 friends. We build asset management software. Sounds complicated, but it's really just a way to help banks and investors keep track of their money. I often stay at the office late, the glow of the computer screen a closer companion than any family gathering. Work is where I find meaning, but my family has never asked what I do. Or maybe they just don't care. My family consists of my father, mother, and my older brother Ryan, 35, their eternal pride and joy. Ryan is tall, charismatic, with a smile that effortlessly wins over anyone. He graduated from an Ivy League school, works in banking, and is always paraded by my parents like a gold medal. Every Thanksgiving or Christmas, relatives crowd around Ryan, hanging on his every word as he talks about big deals, luxurious trips, or his new downtown Chicago apartment. Meanwhile, I sit at the end of the table, quietly eating mashed potatoes, only mentioned in passing. Nate. Oh, he does something with tech. Over the past 2 years, I've quietly paid for the family's electricity, water, cable, and even a roof repair, about $15,000 in total. I didn't do it for praise, I just wanted to help, to feel like I belong to the place I call home. But there's been no thank you, no questions about how I'm doing. My parents are too busy bragging about Ryan, his new girlfriend, his grand plans. I'm just a faint shadow, the backstage figure in my own family, and I've tried. I once thought if I did enough, sacrificed enough, they'd see me. But after dozens of family gatherings, hundreds of careless remarks, and birthdays without a single text, I've realized something. I'm not their son in their eyes. I'm just the guy who pays the bills when they need it. I don't remember the last time my family called me. Maybe 2 years ago when my mom texted to ask if I could pay for a leaky pipe repair. I transferred the money immediately along with a message. Done. You okay, Mom? No reply. My birthday last year passed in silence, marked only by a text from an old co-worker and a promotional email from a bakery near the office. I waited, even though I knew I shouldn't. Waited for a call from Dad, a text from Mom, or even a hollow happy birthday from Ryan, but there was nothing. My family lives in a world where Ryan is the sun and I'm just a faint satellite. Every gathering from Thanksgiving to Christmas parties revolves around him. Ryan got a promotion. Ryan bought a new car. Ryan's dating a perfect girl. Relatives nod approvingly, my parents beam, and I sit there listening like a spectator in the house I grew up in. If someone happens to ask about me, Mom says, "Nate does something with tech. He's busy." Then the conversation swiftly shifts back to Ryan. I don't envy Ryan. He has a natural charisma, a way of telling stories that makes the whole room roar with laughter. But what hurts is my invisibility. I built a fintech company from nothing, staying up all night coding, pitching to investors, and steering the business through the grueling early months. Now the company is worth tens of millions, partnering with major banks. But my family doesn't know, doesn't care, and I'm exhausted from trying to explain. 2 years ago, I stopped going to family gatherings. I told Mom work was busy, that I'd call later. I didn't call, neither did they. The phone stayed silent, but the bills didn't. I still paid for electricity, water, cable, and even the roof repair after a summer storm punched a hole in it. $15,000 in total, but not a single thank you. I wonder, do they even notice what I'm doing? Or am I just an anonymous bank account automatically sending money when they need it? The distance didn't come from some big fight. It was like a small crack in glass spreading over time until the whole pane shattered. I'm not angry at my family, I'm just tired. Tired of trying to prove that I too deserve to be seen. And then April arrived, bringing gentle rains and the vibrant red of geraniums blooming outside my apartment window. I sat on the sofa, my phone in front of me, checking the screen every few minutes. My mother's 60th birthday was approaching, April 25th, a milestone so significant I couldn't stop thinking about it. I remembered the mornings when she made pancakes when I was a kid, the way she laughed at my terrible jokes. She wasn't one for saying "I love you," but in my memories she was a rare bright spot in our family. I hoped even if just once she'd call or text, "Nate, come home for my birthday." But the phone stayed silent. Day after day I checked messages, voicemails, even emails, like a fool waiting for something that would never come. The silence was like a slow knife cutting into my heart. I wondered, does she even remember me? Or am I just a faint name to her, not worth inviting back? The night before her birthday, I sat in my darkened apartment, the glow of streetlights filtering through the window, and a wave of disappointment surged, heavy as a stone pressing on my chest. But I couldn't let this day pass. My mother's 60th birthday wasn't just a party. It was a chance to return, to mend things, to prove I was still part of the family whether they saw me or not. I took 3 days off, a rare move for someone like me always swept up in work. I drove to the mall and picked out a silver necklace with a sapphire pendant, her favorite color. I imagined her wearing it, smiling, and maybe just once saying she was proud of me. I knew Ryan would be there with his new girlfriend, Emily. Over the past 2 years, though we hadn't spoken, I'd seen his Facebook posts, photos of him with a blonde woman, her smile radiant, captioned with pride. "The most amazing girl." His friends' comments overflowed with praise. "She's sweet, stable, perfect for you." I wasn't surprised. Ryan was always the center of attention. But I didn't care. I just wanted to see Mom, to stand in the backyard amid the smell of BBQ and laughter, and feel like I belonged. On the day of the party, I drove to the Chicago suburbs, passing familiar roads lined with maple trees that had grown taller since I last saw them. The house came into view unchanged, its backyard decked out for a classic American BBQ, long wooden tables, a smoking grill, small flags fluttering in the breeze. I arrived early, helping set up tables, wipe glasses, and tie balloons. Mom looked at me, gave a slight nod, but her eyes seemed to be searching for Ryan, who hadn't arrived yet. I stood in the yard, holding the gift box, feeling more like a guest than a son. But I still held on to hope. Hope that today, even for a moment, my family would see me. I stood in the corner of the backyard, clutching a cold water bottle, the golden afternoon sunlight filtering through the maple trees, mingling with the smoky scent of BBQ wafting from the grill. Country music blared from a Bluetooth speaker, blending with the laughter and chatter of dozens of guests, relatives, friends, neighbors, all gathered to celebrate my mother's 60th birthday. I tried to blend into the festive atmosphere, making small talk with a few familiar faces, but every question they asked, "Nate, what are you up to these days?" left me fumbling. I didn't know how to explain my fintech company, the sleepless nights coding, or the tense meetings with investors. I just smiled and said, "Still doing tech stuff," and they nodded, quickly shifting to ask about Ryan. Ryan hadn't arrived yet, but his presence loomed over the party. Mom bustled back and forth, checking the food tables, her voice constantly repeating, "Ryan said he'll be here early with Emily." My father, seated at the main table with a few old friends, bragged about my eldest son and his banking career. I heard Ryan's name over and over like a familiar refrain, while I was just a silent note no one noticed. I tried not to care. I was here for Mom, hoping that today, even for a moment, my family would see me. I helped Mom bring out more trays of roasted potatoes, then stood back, watching her smile at the guests. She looked radiant in a pale blue dress, her silver hair neatly styled. I thought about the sapphire necklace in my jacket pocket, imagining the moment she'd open the gift box. Maybe she'd hug me, say something to make me feel like I belonged here. But before I could pull out the box, my father stood up, beer glass in hand, his voice booming over the music. "Let me say a few words," he began, his gaze sweeping the crowd. Everyone fell silent, turning toward him. I stood near the drink table, feeling like I was fading into the shade. He spoke about Mom, her 60 years of life, our family. Then, as if by habit, he brought up Ryan. "My eldest son, Ryan, is doing big things in Chicago. Banking, million-dollar deals, and now he's bringing home a wonderful girl. We're so proud." The crowd nodded, a few clapping. I gripped my water bottle tightly, trying to swallow the familiar feeling, the sting of being left behind. But he wasn't done. He looked straight at me, his eyes cold as stone. "And then there's Nathan," he said, his voice dropping, laced with disdain. "He does something with computers, no one can figure it out. Shows up here with nothing but trouble. His presence embarrasses this family." His words cut through the air, sharp as a blade. The yard went deathly quiet. I heard whispers, chairs shifting, my heart pounding in my chest. Every eye turned to me. Mom's relatives, neighbors I used to play with as a kid. I wanted to say something, to shout that I wasn't a failure, that I'd built a company worth tens of millions, that I'd paid their electricity, water, and home repairs for 2 years. But my throat tightened. I just stood there, frozen like a statue under judgment. My father raised his beer glass, his voice colder than ever. "Nathan, if you don't leave, don't call me your father anymore." His words hit me like a punch to the chest. Blood rushed to my face, my ears ringing. Mom looked down, saying nothing. No one said anything. I turned, walking across the dew-damp grass, my shoes muddied. I didn't look back. I couldn't. Each step was an effort to keep from collapsing. The gift box in my pocket felt heavy, a reminder that I'd hoped for too much. I was nearly at the gate, my old Honda parked by the road in sight, when a voice called out behind me. "Hey, boss!" The voice was soft but clear, loud enough to silence the entire yard. I stopped, not turning around. I knew that voice. Emily. Emily stood at the entrance to the backyard, her blonde hair tied high, her white dress fluttering gently in the afternoon breeze. She had just arrived with Ryan, who had his arm around her, flashing his familiar confident smile. But her eyes weren't on Ryan, they were on me. "Hey, boss," she repeated, her voice trembling slightly, as if she'd just realized she'd done something she shouldn't have. The crowd froze. Whispers began to ripple like waves hitting the shore. "Boss? Did she just call Nate her boss?" I still didn't turn around. I didn't need to look to know what was happening. Emily was an accountant at my fintech company, one of the hires I'd made 2 years ago. She worked diligently, always submitting reports on time. But I only saw her in team meetings. I knew she'd be at the party today with Ryan. His Facebook posts had made that clear. But I never imagined we'd meet like this, moments after my father had publicly disowned me in front of dozens of eyes. Ryan stepped forward, his voice tinged with confusion. Emily, what are you talking about? Nate's my little brother, not your boss. But Emily shook her head, her gaze shifting from Ryan to the crowd, then back to me. No, I'm not mistaken. Nathan is the co-founder of the company I work for. He's my boss. The yard erupted in whispers. I heard someone ask, "What company?" Another muttered, "Nate's a boss?" That Nate? I stood there, my back to them, my hands clenched into fists. I wanted to leave, to escape the stares and questions, but a part of me, the part exhausted from being overlooked, wanted them to know the truth. Emily continued, her voice steadier now, as if she sensed the need to speak. Nathan's company builds asset management software. It's worth tens of millions and partners with some of the biggest banks in America. He built it from nothing, working day and night to get it through the tough early years. He's one of the most talented leaders I've ever met. The crowd fell silent, the faint twang of country music from the speaker the only sound. I heard my mother's sharp intake of breath, my father slamming his beer glass down on the table. Ryan, for the first time in his life, was speechless. I imagined his face, his confident smile gone, replaced by stunned disbelief. Relatives began questioning Emily, their voices brimming with curiosity. A company that big? How did no one know? Nate really did that? I turned around just once to look at Emily. She stood there, her eyes meeting mine, carrying a hint of apology and a touch of resolve. She didn't say more, but her two words, "Hey, boss," had done what I couldn't in years. They shattered the wall of assumptions my family had built around me. My father stood up, his face rigid. "Nate," he called, his voice no longer sharp but tinged with hesitation. "Why didn't you say anything?" I looked at him, then at Mom, Ryan, and the familiar faces now staring at me as if I were a stranger. I wanted to scream, to ask why I had to say anything when no one ever asked. But I didn't. I just shook my head, walked through the gate, and left. The gift box remained in my pocket, unopened. As I got into my car, the crowd's murmurs echoed behind me. They were talking about me for the first time, but not in the way I'd once dreamed. I started the engine and drove away, leaving behind the afternoon sunlight, the smell of BBQ, and a family that had just realized they'd been wrong about me. But perhaps it was too late. That night, I returned to my Chicago apartment, tossed my keys on the table, and sat in the dark. My phone buzzed incessantly. Texts and calls from Mom, Ryan, even relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. I didn't open them. I knew what they wanted. Explanations, justifications, or worse, to blame me. I didn't want to hear it. I was exhausted from trying to please a family that never saw me. The next morning, I checked my company emails, trying to focus on work to forget the previous day. But a notification from the bank stopped me cold, confirmation that I'd canceled the automatic payments for my family's electricity, water, and cable bills. I'd done it right after leaving the party in a rare moment of anger. I didn't regret it. For 2 years, I'd paid $15,000 for things they took for granted, without a single thank you. If they didn't need me as a son, they didn't need my money either. A few days later, Mom called. I let it ring, but when she called a third time, I picked up. Her voice trembled, not with remorse, but with confusion. "Nate, why'd you cancel the bills? The house lost power last night. Ryan doesn't have the money, you know that." I stayed silent, waiting for an apology, for a question about how I felt being publicly disowned by Dad. But there was none. She just continued. "What did you do at the party?" Emily said things that got everyone talking. "You deliberately embarrassed us, didn't you?" I gripped the phone, feeling like I'd been stabbed again. "Embarrassed?" I asked, my voice eerily calm. "Mom, I was kicked out of your birthday party by Dad. No one said a word to defend me. And now you're calling to blame me?" She went quiet but didn't apologize. She only repeated, "Pay the bills again, Nate." The family's struggling. I hung up, my hand shaking. That was the moment I realized, to them, I wasn't a son. I was a problem solver, a bank account when they needed one. Ryan texted later, a long, angry message. What the hell did you do at the party, Nate? You knew Emily was my girlfriend. Why didn't you say you were her boss? You made me and our parents look like idiots on purpose. I read it, then deleted it. Ryan didn't ask how I felt when Dad humiliated me. Didn't mention the 2 years I paid for their home repairs or bills. He only cared about his image, as always. Relatives reached out too, but not to comfort me. An aunt texted, "Nate, why didn't you tell us about your company? Everyone was shocked. But you upset your parents." I didn't respond. The truth was out, but instead of acknowledging their mistakes, they turned to blaming me for staying silent. I realized a bitter truth. They weren't ashamed of how they'd treated me. They were ashamed of being exposed in front of their guests. The following week, I heard from an old friend. The birthday party had become the talk of the town. People were discussing that Nate who runs a $1 million company and how my family knew nothing about him. My parents, Ryan, and the relatives were in an awkward position, but no one reached out to apologize. They just wanted me to come back, pay the bills, and keep things as they were. I didn't. I stayed silent as I had for years, but this time my silence wasn't about enduring. It was a statement. I was no longer the one footing the bill for a family that didn't see me as kin. 3 weeks after the birthday party, my apartment doorbell rang on a rainy evening. I opened the door, surprised to see my parents standing there, their raincoats drenched, their faces tired but resolute. I invited them in, saying little. They sat on the sofa, Mom glancing around my small apartment, the few framed pictures on the walls, a bookshelf stuffed with tech manuals, a cold coffee mug on the table. Dad, as usual, got straight to the point. "Nate, we need to talk," he said, his voice still carrying the authority that used to intimidate me as a kid. "What happened at the party? It was a misunderstanding. I just wanted you to do better, be clearer like Ryan, but you made everything a mess." I sat across from them, hands clasped, trying to stay calm. "A misunderstanding?" I asked. "You called me an embarrassment to the family, kicked me out in front of everyone. That's a misunderstanding?" He furrowed his brow but didn't answer. Mom jumped in, her voice softer but no less demanding. "Nate, you know we're getting old. Ryan's struggling since he broke up with Emily. The house lost power, cables gone, medical bills are piling up. Help us out, just $2,000 a month to cover expenses." I looked at them, the people I'd once done everything to please. I waited for an apology, a sign they recognized how they'd treated me. But there was none. They just wanted money, as if that was all I could offer. I took a deep breath, my voice calm but firm. "If I help, Ryan has to contribute $1,000 a month, and I want a legal contract transferring the house and land to me after you're gone. I'm not doing charity anymore." Dad shot to his feet, his face flushed. "Ungrateful!" he shouted. "You dare put conditions on your parents? Who do you think you are?" I met his gaze, unflinching. "I'm Nathan," I said evenly. "I built a company from nothing, paid your bills for 2 years without a single thank you. I don't owe you anything. If you need me, respect me." Mom burst into tears, but I knew it wasn't out of remorse. She was scared of losing the financial support I'd always provided. "Nate, how can you talk to your parents like that?" she asked. I shook my head. "I'm not saying anything wrong. I just want to be treated like a son, not an ATM." They left, Dad without another word, Mom wiping tears but not looking at me. The door closed, and the apartment fell silent again. I sat down, feeling like I'd finally lifted a boulder that had weighed me down for years. I wasn't angry at them, I was just sad. Sad that my family wasn't the place I belonged and perhaps it never would be. My apartment fell silent again after my parents left, the sound of rain still pattering outside the window. I sat on the sofa, staring at the cold coffee mug on the table, feeling as though I'd just walked through a door I could never return through. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty for saying no to my family. The pressure to prove my worth, the pain of trying to please people who never saw me. It was gone. I felt relieved, as if I'd finally shed a jacket that was too tight, one I'd worn for far too long. In the weeks that followed, I poured myself into work, into the fintech company I'd built with sweat and dedication. I led my team through a new funding round, signed contracts with 2 major banks, and for the first time in years I allowed myself to savor the success. I stopped glancing at my phone, waiting for a call from Mom or a text from Ryan. They didn't reach out, and neither did I. The silence between us was no longer a wound. It was a boundary, a declaration that I deserved respect. I started living differently. I signed up for a painting class, something I'd always wanted to try but never had time for. I painted clumsy pictures of the maple trees in suburban Chicago, of the afternoon sunlight in Mom's backyard. But this time, they didn't carry sadness. They were memories, not burdens. I walked more, exploring Chicago's small streets, stopping at cafes just to sit and listen to the hum of passers-by. I realized my life didn't have to revolve around my family, around the expectations they'd placed on my shoulders. One afternoon, I received an email from Emily. It was short, professional, but heartfelt. "Nathan, I'm sorry about what happened at the birthday party. I didn't know your family was unaware of your work. I'm ashamed I didn't see how they treated you sooner. I respect you not just as my boss, but as a kind person. I'll keep doing my best at work." I read it, smiled, and replied that I appreciated her, but she didn't need to apologize. Emily had done what I lacked the courage to do: speak the truth. She stayed on at the company, maintaining her professionalism, and I respected her for it. I heard she'd broken up with Ryan, but that wasn't my concern. I was just glad she hadn't been pulled into a world where Ryan was the center. I began questioning my family, not with anger, but with curiosity. Why had I thought I needed them to feel whole? Why had I sacrificed so much for people who never asked how I felt? I realized that family isn't where you're born. It's where you're loved and respected. My family, my parents, Ryan, wasn't that place. And that was okay. I didn't need them to define me. I bought a new necklace, identical to the one I'd meant to give Mom, and kept it on my desk. It wasn't a reminder of failure, but a symbol that I'd tried, I'd hoped, and I'd learned to let go. I was no longer the Nathan of years past, the one who quietly paid bills and waited for recognition. I was Nathan, 32, co-founder of a $1 million company, a clumsy painter, a drinker of black coffee, and a man living life on his own terms. One evening, I sat in my apartment gazing out the window where Chicago's lights twinkled like stars. I thought about my journey, Mom's birthday party, Dad's cutting words, the moment Emily called me boss. I reflected on the years I spent trying to please my family, sacrificing time, money, and self-respect, only to realize I couldn't force anyone to love me. My story isn't about triumph or revenge. It's about learning to stand tall, not by shouting, but with the quiet strength of silence. In American culture, where individuality is celebrated, family pressure remains an invisible tether, binding many to unrealistic expectations. I once believed family duty was eternal, that I had to sacrifice to prove my love. But I was wrong. Refusing the role of savior isn't selfish. It's how I protected my self-worth, found peace, and lived true to myself. To those who've ever felt overlooked in their family, you're not alone. I was once my brother's shadow, the one who paid bills without thanks, the one kicked out of Mom's birthday party for not being impressive enough in their eyes. But I learned that your value doesn't lie in how others see you. It lies in how you see yourself. If your family doesn't see you, find those who do. If they don't love you, love yourself. And if they don't respect you, set boundaries, not to punish, but to protect your heart. I don't know if my family will ever change. Maybe one day Mom will call, Dad will apologize, or Ryan will see me as a brother, not a rival. But I'm not waiting anymore. I found freedom in letting go, in building a life where I'm the center of my own story. I encourage you, those who felt invisible, to share your story. In every story, there's power to heal, to connect, and to remind you that you deserve to be seen. I stood up, brewed a fresh cup of coffee, and looked out at the city. The lights still twinkled, and I smiled. My life isn't perfect, but it's mine. And for the first time, that's enough.